What would you do for music and arts? Would you travel? Would you move? Would you start a new life somewhere else? This is OneMicNite, the podcast that brings you personal stories of artists and people on their journey in life, helping to guide, answer questions, and motivate you in the business. My guest today did just that for music around the world. She is a dedicated educator, a performer, and for the last 10 years, she's been performing and teaching in New York City, LA. She's an organizer of artistic festivals and performances, focusing on young people and adults, audiences to experience multicultural and diversity inclusion in music. Please welcome Megan Fong to OneMicNite. Hi, Megan.
Hey,
How you
Marcos.
doing?
Good, thanks.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast. So, listen, I have questions.
Yeah.
First of all, who is Megan Fong? Who is Megan Fong?
Oh, that's a good question because actually Megan Fong is now Megan Lawson.
Okay, that's important.
Yeah. So
no, that's important.
Yeah. So for performances and my artistic work, I still keep my last name Fong, but for the most part, I've been kind of like moving forward and changing my public name to Megan Fong. I mean Megan Lawson.
Megan Lawson.
Yeah. So today now I am working with my husband. We've been together for the last 10 years, building what we call Desperado Orchestra Studio. And, it really started its inception in Los Angeles where we met. The term Desperado is Spanish for desperate, but, it was a term for people that decided not to travel along the El Camino Real, since they had all of these stops where you had to pay to get through. And so some people, couldn't afford or didn't want to pay to pass through the El Camino Real. And so they were called the Desperados. They were the ones that traveled off the main road. It was probably one of the seediest traveling that you could do in California at that time, because it was, full of, cowboys and outlaws and uncharted territories for a lot of Westerners. And so it was kind of, a dangerous path, but it was, I think of the term as being empowering, like you choose the path that is calling you.
Right.
You don't take the path that other people choose for you just because they say this is the way that you go.
Right. In search of something better. Yeah.
In search of something better.
Right.
That's right.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
So the last 10 years you've been doing that. What exactly has that journey been like? What exactly is it?
Well, it's, thinking about it today, like this is probably one of the hardest years that our business has had, but I've come to a point where I appreciate the struggle. The struggle is what helps me let go of the mundane, and I see more clearly what it is that I want to achieve, and I let go of the things that might be in the end inhibiting that path to my goal.
It's beautiful, because a lot of people never get to that point. A lot of people, like, conceptually you understand it in your mind, but when you actually reach that point, I think that's when things start to open up for you. How do you feel like you got to that point?
Well, it's I have to say that a lot of it is, thanks to my parents, like thanks to my husband, like the support that they've given me, like morally and even, financially, has helped me start my business. Like I started off moving we now live in Hawaii, and we moved here, and I bought like my own little percussion kit, and I went around to different schools, and I met a few kupuna who are elderly, the elderly people of our community, and they suggested talking to certain people within the education system, and when I did that, I found a few small opportunities to do after-school programs. And from there, I was able to use my curriculum to engage a community of children that didn't have access to any kind of music education. They definitely had music. They definitely were doing, learning Hawaiian chants and Hawaiian songs and Hawaiian words. But what I really wanted to do was I wanted to give them the tools to be able to play a multitude of instruments, to understand a very multicultural world of music, and that came with, introducing them to new songs, teaching them how to read notes. And from there, it was, a slower process gaining private students. But it was worth it, because in the end, I was engaging people that felt that this was something they needed, something that they were lacking in their world and resources. And so I started there, and I couldn't have done it without the support of my family, really.
I love that. The support system is what we need. A lot of times we may know the way to go, but we actually need the support around us to give us that leg up to help us succeed in it. Yeah. I want to get back to what you just said, though. You're absolutely right. I think a lot of times people in their lives, let me just say it like this. I feel like we're all connected through the arts. Somehow we're connected through the arts, and whether you just appreciate the arts or whether you want to give it a try and do the arts, there's a through line that brings us all together. So I think you hit the nail right on the head. There are younger people who want to try, who don't know, and find out they have a love and passion for it and start doing it. And then the older people want to do it too. Maybe they played when they were younger, or maybe they appreciate it and now all of a sudden they want to do it. So I think you hit the nail right on the head. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. Thank you.
Where did is there a previous knowledge of Hawaiian culture, or you just took the actual, music and just made that the connection?
I just use music as the connection. Yeah. I use, actually, it's the music, but it's actually also like my understanding of American history and American music that pulls people into the curriculum that I have created. So by saying that, I have to also stress that, when we're talking about American music, we're also talking about the deep roots of African diaspora influences in America. So that's something that I really stress when I teach kids.
Right. I feel like you're exactly right. A lot of the culture, the music comes from the African diaspora. Latin music, Native American, everything. It's all connected through rhythms and beats.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
And and even one of the things that I focus on for my own research and where I find inspiration is through reading about the blues era, more specifically like the early 1900s to the 1920s and 30s. To me, that is one of the most profound moments of American history, when you see just how divided our country was then. The whole, I'm sure people have heard of Elvis, stealing music from the Black artists in that time period. And, it's not just Elvis. It's actually, you know, blues artists were coming up with songs, recording, and they were going to these white record labels, and they were given, you know, pennies for the work that they did.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and maybe not even like getting any royalties when these songs became really popular. And then they were seeing how much of a market was available if they turned these songs into songs that weren't palatable for the white audiences. Right. So they were making twice as much money off of one individual. And like, these were people that were coming from, you know, like their grandparents were enslaved. Their parents might have escaped the South during Jim Crow law and all of that, you know. So like, you know, we're talking about people that like came from, you know, very, very few resources.
Absolutely right. And I feel like it's blues and, you know, even gospel, even, you know, switch Absolutely. Up to jazz too. It's the same thing. You know, we bring it to the people of color, bring it to the forefront, and then it's, not really commercialized, but there's some money put behind it. And then these other artists become famous or more well-known, or, you know, receive the residuals for it. Absolutely right.
Yeah.
So you were saying that in this time right now, it's been hard for you, you know, during the pandemic. Are you teaching remotely? How do you that to?
I'm doing like the blended learning. So, you know, I used to have my students, this is my studio behind me, and I used to have students come here and we would, you know, work for about an hour. But since the pandemic, because, you know, I live in a multi-generational home, I haven't really felt comfortable having anybody here yet. So right now I'm either traveling to students' houses or I'm doing remote lessons. So it's kind of based on what the families are most comfortable with, and, you know, we work from there.
Right.
Yeah.
Where do you see it going in the future? In terms of,
well, I have, like, you know, I have about 18 students right now, and that's keeping me fairly busy, you know, and I also have 2 young kids. So I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and, you know, they're a full-time job. So
so see, I have to say to the women, to the mothers during this time, it's like you're on double duty. You know what I mean? Like, you are really responsible. I don't care how much the father helps you, or if you're a single mother, you have 2 jobs, like 2 full-time jobs.
Yeah.
How do you, so 2 and 5, so they're not in classes yet, so you don't have to worry about that, but just.
They actually, my older son, he's in school right now. He's starting kindergarten.
Okay.
Yeah, and my younger son is just starting daycare. So we, you know, Hawaii's got, like, you know, a bunch of different islands, and we live on the furthest north and west island called Kauai. So the numbers of COVID cases here have been kept fairly low thanks to the restrictions that our mayor has made. And it, you know, it's really hard economically for a lot of people. But I really have come to appreciate this community so much more during this time period, because I really see a lot of people helping and working together to get through this.
I love that.
And yeah, I mean, you know, I think a large part of it is due to the fact that, like, being an isolated island and so far from resources, this community has already been hit by several hurricanes. One of the most detrimental was Hurricane Iniki, and that, you know, stopped school, that stopped, you know, people from having, you know, I think, you know, their farming was probably destroyed. And, you know, I remember hearing stories about people sharing water, sharing food. Like, there's like a network here that is made for survival.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to get your take on what's is the primarily what's the racial makeup of the island? Is it mostly Hawaiians?
There is a majority of Hawaiian like mix. So like a lot of people describe themselves as being Hawaiian Filipino or Portuguese Hawaiian, and we live right across from another island which is strictly for Hawaiian people, and it's called the island of Niihau. So some of the community members that live there come to school on Kauai, and they are what I would consider the traditional Hawaiian. Like they still live off the land, and they don't have very much electricity, if any at all. I think
is that something they do for the preservation of the culture and the tradition?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you're not Hawaiian, you're not allowed. You have to be invited, I think, to go be on that island, and you would have to be a very special person.
Right. Has it been a big change for you coming, because I know you from New York. Has it been a big change for you from New York?
Oh, absolutely. Like New York was like, that was like the go-getter place. It was like every day I felt like I woke up and it was like the opportunities are endless if I could just find them, and that was still coming out of an economic recession that New York had been hit with by the 9/11 attacks.
Right.
So, I remember, for me, I felt like there was a lot of opportunity. And then I remember talking to older musicians and them saying like, oh, well, things aren't the same as they used to be since 9/11. And, a lot of places were closing down, and gentrification was, spreading like wildfire throughout Brooklyn and Manhattan. And,
right.
it was a wild time for Manhattan New Yorkers. And
right. Well, imagine what it was then and imagine what it is now, because you have, New York City, New York is known for its nightlife, the Broadway, the theater, the restaurants, all shut down.
Right.
And even yesterday, the governor announced that they're going to do a reorganization of the buildings in Manhattan, which are now vacant, and make it more affordable housing, make it places for artists to live. And he also announced that, it's fantastic, he also announced that there would be pop-up concerts around the city to help bring the nightlife back. So, he enlisted some stars to come out and do some, things.
That's
like,
great.
yeah, Chris Rock, Amy Schumer. So all these people to help bring the nightlife back, and we feel like it's one more step towards bringing back Broadway, which encompasses musicians, actors, all those people we need here.
That's right.
How did you your vision of who you are change from being in New York, being a go-getter, to now being a business, an entrepreneur, someone who's educating?
Oh, that's a great question. I left New York to go to LA for my master's degree. And that was, the biggest reason why I left. And most of that had to do with the fact that I had a larger financial scholarship in California. The New York conservatories are very competitive. And I had already kind of been told that being a violin player, going into improvisational and jazz music wasn't going to, I wasn't going to be offered like a lot of scholarships. They look at those conservatories are looking for horn players, guitarists, and I was kind of like the bottom rung. So that was one of the big reasons why I went to California. And while I was there, I worked with a couple organizations that were doing music education programs, and I had a falling out with one of them, and I don't really want to go too into it. It was, complicated, or maybe not maybe not complicated, but I don't want to throw anybody out there as like a placing blame. I don't want to blame anybody for what happened, because really, like, when I lost that job, it was probably one of the best things that happened to me.
You took the words right out of my mouth. It's exactly what shaped you to who you are now. That's why it happened. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah. And that's one again, like, that's like one of the things that I look back on where I'm like, wow, that was so hard. And I was so like heartbroken. And like, I felt like, so much of who I was like had been stripped from me. And that struggle, that process helped me let go of the things that I don't value, like I don't value the things that the person fired me valued. Right. So, what is it that I value? And I pushed forward with that. And I was able to get some private students again, and I was traveling all over the city. By that time, me and my husband had just met and were living together. And during that, during this 2 year, I guess, period, because we were like all over the place. We were going from, West Hollywood to Glendale, and we were in, just like Silver Lake, and we would be doing all different kinds of like, maneuvers. So we had like a Prius and a bike, and so we would bike and drive and split and come back.
Wow.
Yeah.
I like that.
And we found some of the best roads to go on. Like we were able to go across town from one end of LA to the other in 30 minutes, which is like unreal.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's so funny when you, like you said, when a door closes and another one opens, and you just give it up to the universe, and you just say, listen, this is not who I am. This is what I stand for. You just go. Just go.
Yeah.
And it takes you in the direction that you need to go in. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about your band. I want to talk real quick about Desperado.
Okay.
First of all, the music is out of this world. Like literally out of this world. I love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So we started off as a duet. We were doing guitar and violin, and we had played, a couple places in LA, and we did like a tour of Northern California to Southern California. And it was during the beginning of the Great Recession. So, like at the same time that we were like able to like, make a living teaching and working all over the city, we were also dealing with the fact that like in the future, we didn't know how much of that opportunity was going to be there. So, we played a lot of music to try to build up a repertoire. And by the time it was 2012, so we decided that we should move to China, because the lifestyle that you can have as an American back then, like working in China, was like on par with like any middle class person in America. Like you could afford food, rent, and have savings. And working as an English teacher was like no duh, like
no brainer. That's a top of the line. Sure.
Like let's escape this and get some some funds so that we can like really do what we want to do, and which was continue to build our brand. And so we played a lot, and we made several songs. We made an EP, and we sold a bunch of them on CDs. This was still like when people had CDs.
And for those of you who are listening that don't know what a CD is, that's funny.
Yeah. So we moved to China, and then we spent 2 years there, and we were like, if we decide to stay here, like, and build a life, like, we're gonna be in like some of the most horrific, toxic environmentally disastrous situations. Like the pollution there was out of this world. Like, yeah, like we would look outside our window and it would just be this like, sometimes it would be a purple haze, sometimes it would be an orange haze, but you know, we had to wear masks constantly. And
are you serious?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that happened was my husband Jay, he got really sick. Like I had never seen him this sick before. He had trouble breathing. Luckily, our doctor gave us antibiotics to take with us, and he took those and he got better. But we were like, you know, if we stay here, this is going to be what we're going to deal with, like for the rest of our time here. And we didn't really want to see our family and, you know, each other go through that. So
that's a lot.
So we moved to Hawaii, where my parents offered for us to live. They offered for us to move in and, you know, get started, and we're you know, it's funny to say that we're still kind of getting started, seeing how far we've come, you know.
Sure.
The journey never ends, you know.
It never ends.
It's like as soon as you finish some hurdles, like, and reach certain goals, like you find that, you know, there's more to what you want to do, and we just continue and you build on it. And
but you also have to realize too how many people you already reached and you've already touched with what you're doing. You know, it's hard for us as performers to understand that there are people who are watching, there are people who are enjoying what we've already done, but we as performers and artists, we're still reaching for more and more and more.
Yeah, right, because we don't retire.
Right.
You know, like
Exactly.
Ideas don't just stop coming. Right? Exactly. Inspiration doesn't die. Like, you know, like we're always reaching that new thing. Yeah.
Because your music has you know, universal appeal. It has worldwide appeal. I want to mention a couple of things too. You have especially, like, first of all, outer space. The visual for outer space is bananas. It gives me like, man, it gives me like funk soul, like Earth, Wind and Fire, but to another level. Cosmic.
Absolutely. That's what it is. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. So my husband actually has been taking the front line, you know, because we have a young family, and, you know, performing was something that we were doing more often. Mm-hmm. It was like really hard to be like, okay, so like, let's just leave the kids at 10 o'clock at night and we'll come back at 2 in the morning. Should there be an emergency, you know, someone would have to get off stage or whatever. And then we were kind of in need of like somebody to be like more of a manager and somebody to be the artist. And, you know, like, and I have to like stress how much, you know, like we kind of give ourselves those roles, but really like our relationship is very, very synchronized, and like we work a lot together on everything.
That's a beautiful place to be in. That's a beautiful chemistry to have. It is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I feel so lucky all the time that, like, you know, somebody that I married is understands, you know, this drive that we have as an artist, and has the compassion to understand the needs of the family. Like, you know, it's many different hats in one small relationship.
Right.
You know? But it's kind of necessary to have, you know, someone, and to have that sort of like mutual respect and communication. So you know, I really can't be more thankful to have somebody so wonderful.
I love that. And I can't be more thankful to have you on this show and sharing your experience with us and inspiring us with your journey. So please, Megan Lawson?
Yeah.
Tell everybody how we can get in touch with you, how we can find you, how we can get into Desperado.
Yeah, well, www.desperadoorchestra.com. You can stream our music on all platforms. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram. And you can also buy some of our apparel on Etsy. We have some shirts that we have for sale, and just give us a holler.
That's
We'd love
right.
to hear from everyone.
Please support Desperado Orchestra. Megan, thank you so much for being on MarcosLuis.
Yeah. Hey,
And make
thanks,
sure
Marcos.
make sure you follow Desperado on all social media. You can follow us at OneMicNite. OneMicNite is spelled OneMicNite. You can also follow me at MarcosLuis, MarcosLuis on everything. Go to the .com. You can find all my social links. Thank you for joining me for this episode in OneMicNite, the podcast. We'll see you next time.